Hello everyone, and welcome again to another video session with a professional in the field. It's Dr. Rice here from Concordia University in Texas, and I just wanted to introduce you guys to James DeMeo. James, welcome to today's conversation. Really glad to have you.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. Absolute pleasure to be here with the students at Concordia University.
Super. All right. Well, James, if you could give us just an overview, kind of a background of your experience, where you're from, all of that, so you can better acquaint yourself with our students here.
Excellent. Thank you again. My name is James A. DeMeo. I'm a retired police detective from the Nassau County Police Department on Long Island, New York. I spent 21 years in law enforcement. And like many of you in the class, I decided to kind of take a look at sports in terms of furthering my education. And I pursued a master's degree from Adelphi University in Garden City, New York, an MS in sports management. And I decided to kind of take a look at how I could take my past in law enforcement and kind of combine it with a passion for sports. And in turn, I went to graduate school, and I kind of looked at what some of my interests would be. I mean, I took sport marketing classes. I was able to speak to one of my professors, Terry Goldstein, who's been with the New York Islanders for quite some time, and he had asked me, you know, what were some of my interests in terms of second career opportunities, and I was able to have the good fortune of actually seeing the security operations for the New York Islanders while I was in graduate school. So that was kind of where my interest in sports security at that time had taken me, and of course over the past couple of years I've been able to kind of further that passion in terms of, you know, just trying to make an impact in the industry.
Great. So sports security, can you give us just kind of a little bit, what would you say is sports security? What's your definition?
Well, it's hard to answer it, of course, in one sentence. But if you could just imagine being in an 80,000-seat arena or stadium, for that matter, and working with law enforcement and venue managers and security directors to really essentially make people safe and secure. And that's kind of the industry that has led me with my passion. And you know, and we're seeing in light of many of the recent challenges. Obviously, we had the Boston Marathon bombing. We have the emergence of drones. We're seeing just, I was just in preparation for today's class, I did some research this morning, and I was able to find out that the FBI is going to be training 30,000 police officers over the next 2 years on how to obviously respond to active shooter situations. So no matter what the security vertical it is, whether it's retail loss prevention, which I'm currently working in, whether it's event management, hospital, school environments, higher education, at the end of the day, it really is incumbent upon security professionals to train their staff to react to situations effectively and efficiently. So my interest has really been in the event management side, and that's why I think today's discussions are really indicative of some of the opportunities that may present themselves for the students upon graduation from Concordia. And one of the things that I like to recommend, obviously, is to speak to Dr. Rice, industry professionals like myself, in terms of finding out ways that you can kind of create your own personal brand to network into this industry. And it's a terrific industry to be into. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. But quite honestly, it's very difficult to kind of make inroads. So by utilizing social media platforms, by continuing education, if you decide after your undergraduate work that essentially you want to go on to graduate work or a doctorate, which is something I'm considering, there's many different avenues that you can take. But I would encourage each and every one of you to think about where your skill set will fit into this industry.
Great. And you brought up one of the things that is really important, I think, with any sport professional, or at least aspiring sport professional, is the ability to network and do it well. And I know that you do an outstanding job in that area. Can you share with the class members here that are watching this kind of take us through how you do your networking and kind of how you've climbed the ladder, if you will, in this profession.
Well, that's an excellent question, and I think it's something that, some of the advice that I could pass on to the students would be very useful in that. I think it's really important to kind of, study the profiles of the folks that you're connecting with. In particular, I've made some major inroads on LinkedIn. I've created a couple of groups, one group here in Central Texas, another group which is near and dear to me, which is sports security professionals. But being a second career individual has been very challenging in trying to kind of bridge the gap from my prior career in law enforcement to obviously, maintaining a profitable livelihood in sports security. And of course, I'm interested in the research side of it and the continuing education and the training. But, getting back to Dr. Rice's question, I would just encourage each and every one of you to think about kind of, obviously blogging and writing articles, and essentially, again, like I mentioned, just reading the profiles of the industry professionals in the industry. Whether it's event management, if it's sport marketing, if it's operations, in my case, sports security, but trying to figure out how you can create a synergy, a nexus between your skill set and the person that actually would consider hiring you. And for me, like I said, social media has been really advantageous. In particular, and Dr. Rice and I have had these discussions, but I've made some major inroads with the NCS4, which is affiliated with the University of Southern Mississippi. And I had the good fortune last July of attending a conference. And I would think, again, if obviously money is tight with student loans and everything else, but if you can avail yourself of conferences and continuing education and networking, social networking in the sports and entertainment industry, I think that's a good way for you to kind of bridge the gap in terms of where you're going to fit into the industry.
Okay, great. With many of our students are teachers and coaches in the public school setting here in the state of Texas. We do have some folks that are from outside the area, but most of our folks are from here in Texas. What does risk management look like for, say, let's just say as an example, a small town high school, let's just say Lago Vista High School right across the lake from us here in Lake Travis? What would that look like?
Well, again, depending on the situation, whether it's a middle school, a high school, college, professional ranks, I think mitigating risk is really something that security professionals pride themselves in. Brand protection, patron protection. The security protocols are going to be similar, but it really depends on the demographics of the folks that are coming to watch a particular event. And obviously, if you look at what's happening in Major League Baseball and the NFL with effective screening measures and their alliances with the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI, that's more on a national professional level. But mitigating risk, whether it's again at a local high school, a junior college, it could be some type of event on campus at Concordia, really keeping people safe and just making sure that the folks that are entrusted with the responsibility of keeping people safe are trained properly. We've seen out in LA, for instance, with Major League Baseball, that there was an adverse fan situation a year or so ago, and basically it was a Giants-Dodgers game, and it turned out that a fan was a victim of a very brutal assault, and we saw that the Dodgers were held civilly liable in court because they were able to prove that they had inadequate security staffing on that particular day. So again, that is something that maybe the Dodgers want to take a look at moving forward in terms of better training their staff or allocating resources to certain events so that they can mitigate risk and protect themselves from potential loss in life and civil liabilities that go with running particular sporting events.
Okay. You brought up the Boston Marathon bombing earlier, and of course you talked a little bit about some of the challenges some of the things that have made it a lot more safe because of folks like you and folks in your industry. What would you say is the most I don't know, what's the top technical thing that's come out recently? I mean, we've read about closed circuit televisions and how they made a huge difference throughout, or cameras rather, throughout the Boston Marathon bombing area. What's the most recent technology in your field?
Well, again, it's a great question, and if you look at the course for the marathon, 26.2 miles, very very difficult, to secure 100%. And I always use the analogy: if you're a Major League Baseball player and you get up to bat 10 times and you get 3 hits, you're a 300 hitter, you could probably make $5 to $7 million a year. Well, nobody in the security industry bats 1,000. So, there's a terminology that's known as lessons learned. So obviously, the way they approached the marathon prior to the incident, and as tragic as it is, and our hearts go out to the families and victims, but the way they looked at things in Boston prior to the event is obviously a lot differently than they look at it now. So whether it's a soft or hard target, it could be the Cedar Park Center, it could be the University of Texas where the Longhorns play, it could be Circuit of the Americas where you have 140,000 people for racing. It really doesn't matter. You have to train your staff to react appropriately and efficiently. And it's real important that you have a very good working relationship with the first responders, whether it's EMS, law enforcement, venue directors. Everyone has a vested interest in keeping people safe, and again, like I mentioned earlier, just reducing risk, and depending on whatever the sporting event is, training is essential. It's an essential ingredient to having a successful and safe event.
Would you say, I mean, you brought up the word training, and obviously, as aspiring and current sport professionals that are in this class, many of these students have had human resources and had other classes in this program. Training, I've found, is such an incredible part. And do you think it's lacking in sport management? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think Dr. Rice, there's always room for improvement, and like I mentioned earlier, the threats and the vulnerabilities are coming at us, security folks, from many different angles. And again, whichever vertical you're in, you have to be prepared. And for many years, the asset protection discipline has been kind of reactionary in nature. And I think in light of what happened in Connecticut with the shootings and the turmoil in the Middle East, the incident in Paris, the active shooter situations that are going on across the country, I think that you can't really underestimate the significance of ongoing training. And one of the things that I pride myself in is going to conferences and networking and asking questions, and just trying to keep my skill set and my level of training as high as I possibly can. We're not to fear these challenges, because we can overcome fear with knowledge, and knowledge essentially gives us power. And if we have the ability to continue to train, continue to learn, and just constantly try to improve the way we go about making people safe, it puts us all in the best position possible to be effective security leaders. And like I said, I think that sport marketers are finally starting to understand the significance of placing a greater value on the security aspect of running their venue operations. And I use the analogy about going out to a restaurant and getting a good meal. Well, it's the same thing in sports and entertainment. If you have a pleasant experience and you're surrounded by fans that act appropriately, and if there's situations where there's certain intoxicated patrons nearby, if you have that sense that security individuals that are monitoring the game are going to step in and take proactive measures to make the environment that much safer, the likelihood is you're going to have a favorable experience and obviously spread that information to friends and family. But most importantly, you're going to come back and experience that in-person live experience where it's something that's enjoyable for you. So I really think it's incumbent upon guest services and security folks to work hand in hand to make the sporting experience as pleasurable as possible, but also not to let their guard down, but to follow the certain procedures and protocols in the event there's an emergency, that the folks are properly trained to react accordingly to evacuate the building, and that could come in terms of tabletop exercises and computer simulation programs, but just essentially being able to effectively lead people and during a chaotic situation, and try to obviously save as many lives and keep people as calm as possible.
Great. One last question is pertaining to graduate education, and as you stated, you have a master's degree from Adelphi on Long Island there. And what all of our students here are pursuing, or they're in process of completing a graduate degree at Concordia. How has that made a difference in your career?
I think personally it's helped me make tremendous inroads, and you know, I spent quite a bit of money pursuing a master's degree. It was personal and as well as professionally rewarding, and as I've discussed with Dr. Rice, my interest in continuing my education on the PhD level. But I would say that you know, I would encourage the students to try to get as much education as possible. You know, a graduate degree is not essentially a guarantee of employment. I think it's a combination of internships and volunteering and networking. But you know, obviously, for instance, if you're interested in college athletics, I would certainly recommend trying to get a master's degree. If you're going to be working, let's say, in compliance with the NCAA, I think it's helped me a lot in terms of my second career opportunities as trying to be you know, someone who is marketable and has a certain skill set. But I think that you know, you should really study sports because you have a passion for it. The money will come. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and as I've mentioned, you know, in my discussions with Dr. Rice, you know, whether it's selling popcorn or, you know, working on a conversion crew, if you really want to be in this field, nothing really should be beneath you in terms of, you know, yourself rolling up your sleeves and just, you know, doing whatever it is that you have to do to kind of create a segue into, you know, getting to where you want to go. And you'll get there. And if you align yourselves with, you know, obviously people that have the same passion that you do, if you're willing to work hard, you'll definitely, you know, accomplish your goals. So I think that, you know, graduate education and continuing education is very, very important. And I would encourage you to, you know, obviously continue your studies with Dr. Rice, and then eventually, you know, lean on him, and with his permission, lean on folks like me, if you're interested in security, to kind of help you bridge the gap to finishing your education, and of course trying to, you know, transition into a career situation for employment.
Great. One other question, and I will close. But I know you've worked at the opening of the Barclays Center, which is obviously one of the newest and most expensive sport facilities in the world. What is the most challenging experience you've had in sport security?
You know, I've experienced, you know, so many different rewarding experiences. I mean, you know, working, as you mentioned, the grand opening with AEG for the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, that was a fantastic experience for me, because that was my first position that I landed after retiring from the police department, and I was able to get that position because of LinkedIn. I was able to connect with the hiring manager, and they brought me in, and I worked all 8 shows for Jay-Z and Beyonce. There was college basketball there. There was Barbra Streisand. Sensation was there. It was just a wonderful experience seeing the emergence of a billion-dollar sports arena, you know, at the corners of Flatbush and Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn. And it had been 40 or 50 years since professional sports had come to Brooklyn. And now we're seeing that the Barclays Center is one of the higher revenue-producing venues in the country. So I had the ability and the wherewithal and the experience and training to sit in the control room and utilize the technology in that command center. And you know, I always get the question about how important technology is, and as I've mentioned in prior discussions with Dr. Rice, the folks that are in the control rooms are only as good as the training that they receive. You know, you can give somebody $1 million you know, CC television, but if they're not trained with the software, if they're not trained with tracking incidents, if they're not trained properly with effective radio communications, all that really is essentially meaningless in terms of the kind of effect that technology can have on the overall outcome of keeping people safe. So again, if we look at the Barclays Center, you mentioned that obviously the Golden State Warriors are kind of leading the charge in terms of iBeacon technology. They're planning on building a new basketball arena in San Francisco in a few years. Levi Stadium, the home of the 49ers, which is probably the most tech-savvy stadium in America. We're seeing that that's where the industry is taking us in terms of security. We're seeing the importance of security officials monitoring social media prior, during, and after events, and also studying the demographics of the performers on social media before they come into your actual venue. So I think it's important to do your homework, to always have your A game, to constantly try to learn from each other and train and do exercises. So in the event there is an adverse situation, your staff is going to react accordingly in the best interest of public safety. And the technology is huge. Social media is huge. The marketers are understanding the importance of now listening to what the security professionals are telling them in terms of what they need for resources. And I think they're realizing that, yes, it's important to make profits, but we really need to put some money or more money into training to reduce turnover and also to put the best product out there in terms of a security professional in the field.
Right. James DeMeo, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to be with us today. Is it okay if I offer our students your contact information if they have any questions of you?
Oh, that'd be great. It'd be my honor. And again, I would encourage them, with your permission, to obviously look to join a few of my groups. And just as an aside, I know we talked about this yesterday, but Concordia, I'm sure most of the students know this, but Austin, Texas is probably the most popular city to live in right now in the United States. And according to the Austin Business Journal, there's about 109, 110 people per day moving here. So between Circuit of the America and the Aztecs and obviously what's going on at the Cedar Park Center and the University of Texas, the economy is very, very good. Unemployment, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, was 3.9% in November. So a lot of folks are working. A lot of folks are migrating from California. It's small business friendly. It's tech savvy. And really what's happening is people are, because the economy is so good, they're willing to spend money on sports and entertainment platforms, which I think presents really good opportunities for the students once upon graduating from Concordia.
Super. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for taking your time today to watch this presentation. If you have any questions of myself regarding contacting Mr. DeMeo, just let me know. And as always, have a great week. If you have questions, reach out. Take care.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. Take care.